We've got paper and audio evidence on this channel from the people at CARE that shows they wanted to bounce back and forth between whether they were or were not mandatory reporters. We also went through the list of what mandatory reporters will say if they don't want to do their jobs. What I typed here is, are workers at CARE Inc. mandatory reporters in Oregon? And it says yes. Workers at organizations like CARE Inc., providing home care and support in Oregon, are mandated reporters for abuse of children and vulnerable adults, the elderly or disabled, required by state law ORS 430.735-765, sorry about that, and 419B.005 to immediately report suspected abuse to authorities like DHS or law enforcement, a duty that covers them 24/7, even outside work hours if observed personally. What that means is, if I tell them about abuse, they do actually have to turn it in. We'll go over that. Who mandatory reporters are and what they have to turn in. We've already done quite a few of them on what they have to turn in. But we're going to continue with this because all of the excuses that they've made at CARE, such as they are not mandatory reporters and that they're just a nonprofit, those are government funds that are paying those wages to those people, for those people who work there to be very, very biased in their selection process, as well as whether or not they're willing to do their jobs. Obviously, Russell was doing something. We did get quite a bit done when Russell was working with me. And when he stopped working with me, it was a very, very strange set of circumstances. Neither one of us was informed that we weren't going to be working with each other anymore. That was, I want to say, about 4 months ago now. That's a guess. I suppose I should continue reading what's on here, but the story itself is important as well. Russell, the stuff that we were working on that I needed for turning these criminals in, as well as the stuff that I needed to get housing, kind of coincided. So we were working on getting everything that I would need to get housing, my birth certificate, social security card, all that kind of stuff, getting my disability money back. And he worked on that with me, and we got it done. Most of it. The parts that were done or were finished between me and Russell. Shelly is their go-to for blowing people off. And you got to see what that resulted in. She just doesn't show up to work. I'm supposed to turn stuff in immediately, but I can't just turn it into the police. The police are not going to investigate. What they will do is dig through for anything that they can use to pretend that I was doing something horrible for no reason whatsoever, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll have to just take it, because public defenders don't do their jobs either. They're mandatory reporters too. So we're going to go into that now. God damn it. I fucking hate that rat. So I live in a plastic tent. It's pretty decently nice and cozy, but there's a rat that wants to live in here with me. And obviously, from time to time, he starts shuffling stuff. Now, if they observe abuse outside of work, then they have to turn that into, like, if they observed it personally, but that only counts for outside of work. Who is a mandatory or mandated reporter in Oregon? Oregon law broadly defines mandated reporters, including many roles involved in care, such as health and support workers, nurses, home health aides, personal support workers, PSWs, home care workers, employees of in home health services, and those in developmental disabilities programs. Public or private officials, broadly defined to cover many people in roles providing services or related to child or vulnerable adult welfare. Specific professionals, clergy, social workers, counselors, attorneys, law enforcement, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, etc. So I've been going to the right people. Just at the very beginning, they didn't take it seriously and they blew me off. And now that they know it's a serious situation and that they could get into a lot of trouble, they're blowing me off. So they're doing the same thing, they're just doing it for different reasons. It says, your responsibilities. Report immediately if you suspect abuse, physical, sexual, financial, neglect, etc., of a child or vulnerable adult. Report 24/7. The duty applies during or outside of work hours if you witness abuse personally. So the thing is that last part, the personally part, is during or outside of work, but it's outside of work hours if you witness it personally. Like, let's say you go eat dinner in a restaurant and you see some lady beating on her kids over in the corner, then you are required to turn it in. But the other thing is, if that child comes in and talks to you during your work hours and says, hey, my mom or my dad or whoever beat the hell out of me at the restaurant last night, well, that's also still your duty to report. It says report to authorities, call DHS or local law enforcement, telling a supervisor does not fulfill the legal requirement. And that's what I was telling all of them deputies in the jail. The deputies were telling me, oh, well, when you try to turn in abuse against Lieutenant Silvera, I have to turn it into Lieutenant Silvera. I was like, well, first of all, that's against the law. Many of the deputies in there said that they had witnessed the abuse against me firsthand. And even in saying those things, they wanted to turn off their cameras so that it wasn't recorded in most cases. Not all of them, just most of them. I also kept a log of what we talked about in most of those conversations, and I also put a little star next to it if it was a conversation that they recorded on their body camera, which is good. It says, report abuse types, covers child abuse and abuse, neglect of elderly 65 plus and persons with physical or developmental disabilities, or both, by the way. It says, in essence, if you work in a care related capacity in Oregon, you are almost certainly a mandated reporter, legally obligated to report suspected abuse of children and vulnerable populations. Just so you know, I did look up CARE as I was doing this. This is what I looked up first. It said, yes, CARE Inc. Oh, this one I wrote, does CARE Inc. of Tillamook, Oregon accept public funds from the government? It says, yes, CARE Inc. and Tillamook accepts and utilizes public funds from the government as seen through their administration of federal state housing programs like Veterans Affairs, COC, and receiving grants for services confirming they are a recipient of government funding for community support. It says how CARE Inc. uses public funds. Housing assistance. They run programs like COC Rapid Rehousing and Together We House, which use federal funds to help homeless individuals and families and those with severe mental health conditions secure housing. Well, I've been going there and filling out the paperwork since 2022. I still haven't gotten that. It says emergency aid. CARE Inc. provides financial aid for emergency needs. What specific emergency needs? It doesn't actually say that. It says often supported by grants, including federal COVID 19 relief funds, coronavirus relief fund. Okay, so they have emergency aid if you have COVID, I guess. Community development. They are involved in affordable housing initiatives and programs for low income residents, often funded by public sources. And what are we doing? For example, me personally, I went in literally every day, with the exception of one, for like, I want to say the first 4 months after I got out of jail. Every single day I went down there. Um, it says, in essence, CARE Inc. acts as a sub-recipient and administrator of federal and state grants to provide critical services in Tillamook County, making them reliant on public funding streams. So, meanwhile, what we're ending up with is we've got people like me who don't do drugs and don't go running around getting violent with people, but yet people want to repeatedly get violent with me and the police won't do a thing. None of these agencies will do a thing. One of the situations of this abuse is that what's happened in the past does matter. It's the previous history of abuse from these people. That includes the recordings of these people assaulting me and threatening my life and threatening my sister's life and my friends and family's lives. While I have to deal with predators who want to pretend that I'm threatening theirs. That's not okay. So yes, CARE Inc. does accept public funds. Let's see this one. All right. Are all CARE Inc. workers mandated reporters in Oregon? It says yes, many CARE Inc. roles like home health aides, personal support workers, child care, medical, and mental health pros are mandated reporters in Oregon, as the law covers many public, private officials and direct care workers who interact with vulnerable populations, children, seniors, disabled, requiring 24/7 reporting of suspected abuse or neglect. Who's covered? Examples relevant to care roles. Healthcare: doctors, nurses, aides, therapists, home health aides, personal support workers, child care providers, foster care providers, operators of recorded programs, human services, employees of DHS, community mental health, developmental disabilities programs. And you notice all of these places, rather than doing their jobs to get me to the people who need to investigate it and make sure that it's actually investigated, I'm sent around in circles where even the services that the government runs that we're supposed to go to when we're harmed are committing the very same crimes. You get abused at home and then you go try to turn it in and you're abused by the government and their employees. Woohoo! God bless America. It says education, school employees, university employees, often all of them now, others, peace officers, clergy, social workers, firefighters, EMS, attorneys, elected officials, etc. So there's quite a bit there. Key points: 24/7 duty. The obligation to report is personal and continuous, not just during work hours. Vulnerable populations. Reporting covers suspected abuse or neglect of children, seniors who are 65 plus, and adults with disabilities or mental illness. And they keep calling me mentally ill, but not doing anything about the abuse. Except blaming me, telling me that it's my fault that it happens, and then writing down on paper that it's a delusion. Well, glorious, glorious, oh happy day, right? Report to authorities. It says telling a supervisor isn't enough. You must directly contact the proper authorities like DHS or law enforcement. Protection. The law protects reporters from liability if the report turns out to be unfounded, provided it's made in good faith. How to find out for a specific role at Caring. Check your specific job description at the organization's policies, but if the role involves direct care or contact with vulnerable groups, they are almost certainly a mandated reporter under Oregon law. And yes, the disabled are a vulnerable population. Males are a vulnerable population, which is horrible. People want to ignore that there's a lot more crimes committed against men than against women. A lot more. We're a lot more likely to be murdered, first of all. We're also more likely to be sent to war. We're more likely to work in the construction industry, which is dangerous, or out on the sea, which is dangerous, or on oil rigs, which is dangerous. Speaking of, I'm not sure if the recording recorded that, but that was some of the neighbors across the street. This if I call it in, it won't be taken seriously, and I'll be targeted by the people across the street. I know this because I've called things in before. So, I'm not sure if you can hear the people out there screaming or person, but it's like 4 in the morning. So, that's the reality of my life. Um, I try to get to sleep, that'll start up again. There's a lot of people in the neighborhood moving out. That's one of the things about taking people who are not schizophrenic and not delusional and trying to stuff them into a place with a bunch of schizophrenic, delusional people. Then there's people with drug induced psychosis. People like me who are not interested in doing any of those drugs, stuffing me in to places that primarily only help those people out. That doesn't help me. That just puts me in contact with people who are gonna more than likely try to take advantage of me. When I'm sent to these different services that have these drug addicts and schizophrenics there, and then one of them tries getting violent with me or starts threatening me over some rumor they heard, and I try to turn it in, I'm told, well, it's my fault for being there. It's my fault for going to those places, and it's my fault for hanging out with those people. Well, here's the thing, I see them as human beings. But they're driving me nuts. I don't have a safe environment. I don't have a place where I can go to get away from this. If I call 911, I might get arrested for improper use of 911. Also, I'll more than likely be told that I'm not allowed to make a report for someone else. That one seems real popular. By the way, the lady who's screaming, there's actually video footage I have of her and four other people, or seven people altogether, um, involved in a fight, like right across the street from here. I, I don't I don't have the ability to handle this. And then of course there's a situation where the social isolation that I'm experiencing has a lot to do with my mental health. Having to listen to people doing that affects my mental health. And having to deal with being treated like these things are schizophrenic delusions by the very people I'm supposed to go to for help, that affects my mental health. It's horrible. I was gonna show some video evidence of some of the assaults. Some of them are already up on this channel, but um, that lady screaming is taking away my ability to pay attention to what's going on. I'm just full of anxiety at the moment. I got PTSD. It's difficult for me to deal with situations like this. Um, they'll just let her scream. I haven't seen anybody other than those four people get violent with her. Everybody else just lets her scream her head off. There's two other women in town who do the same thing. Obviously, the things that a mandatory reporter is not supposed to say. They say anyway. You got to hear about, it says when a mandatory reporter doesn't want to report abuse against a disabled adult, they often say things like, I don't want to get involved, it's not my business, they seem fine to me, or I don't want to cause trouble, but legally they must report any reasonable suspicion of abuse, like neglect, financial exploitation, or physical and sexual abuse, to authorities like Adult Protective Services or the police, because silence can be a crime and reporting empowers the victim and holds abusers accountable. But nobody wanted to do that, so none of my abusers have been held accountable. It says why people hesitate to report: fear of retaliation, worries about the abuser, caregiver, or the system, doubt or uncertainty, maybe it's not abuse, or I don't have proof, but proof isn't needed, just suspicion. Protecting privacy, not wanting to intrude on the adult's life, or self-determination, which is an excuse. Feeling overwhelmed, not knowing how or who to call. Well, they should have been trained in this to begin with. It says what they should say to themselves and others. I have reasonable suspicion based on these facts, e.g., unexplained injury, caregiver isolating them, financial issues. Yeah, duh. My legal duty as a mandated reporter requires me to report this, especially in Oregon, where laws like ORS 430.735 mandate reporting for intellectual or developmentally disabled adults. Reporting protects the adult's right to safety, which is essential for self-determination. I'm not safe, obviously. I never know when one of these people will target me just because they had a bad day, because they didn't get the drugs that they wanted, because their boyfriend or girlfriend left them, because they have some delusion that everybody's cheating on them. It says what to do instead of staying silent in Oregon. Call the Oregon DHS Abuse Hotline, 855-503-SAFE. Contact law enforcement for serious physical or sexual abuse. Report suspicion, not proof. You don't need evidence, just a reasonable belief something is wrong. Reporting abuse against vulnerable adults isn't optional. It's a legal obligation to ensure their safety and dignity, overriding personal hesitation. So, I'm sure you can hear that screaming. Sometimes it'll go on for a full hour, sometimes it's 10 or 15 minutes. I do apologize, I'm not able to finish this video. Obviously, this is a scary situation.